will be as follows. As we start, we need to go to our program files, and then we go to XAMPP, and then we go to control panel. So under control panel, if everything is installed well, we're supposed to run our Apache. Our Apache does our web services, and MySQL does our database services. So we need to have the two running. Okay. And then our browser, we usually have our browser, which will be able to run any of the services that we want. So let's say, for example, we want to run our local host, right? If our Apache looks like this, it's not running, and our MySQL is not running, if we type out localhost, we get an error, simply because our server is not running. And this is what then runs our PHP and our content, right? So since our server is not running, we won't be able to connect. So take it this way. In one of the lessons, we'll try and say, I give you access to my computer, and then you access the website that is actually on my computer. So that is what we at least need to understand how our web services work. So at the same time, if I go on start, I start my Apache, and it starts running. Would have to wait for it because the computer is not as fast as it should be. Okay, if I refresh, it then tells me potential security risk, accept risk and continue. And then now we have our local host running. Right? At the same time, we can also do it with our Opera. But I might just need to close some pages because Opera saves pages. That's why I really don't like working with it. Anything that I would have saved, it will start showing if I run it. But whilst we wait for it, we'll just then get to see that this is our web server running. So at this particular instance, we can now have our website running. But we still need to have our MySQL running because it's what drives our PHP MyAdmin. So in this particular instance, if I open my PHP MyAdmin, when my MySQL is not running, it will then give me access denied simply because I don't have MySQL running. So for MySQL, or for me to be able to view my database, I just need to have my MySQL running. And when it's running, you then realize the first message that I had got was could not connect. So if I refresh, now that my MySQL is running, I should be able to access my database side of it. Okay, it's taking a bit of time. Now my Opera is open. Let me close most of the tabs because we want to just see. We want to see our local host. It gives us exactly the same content as what we have in our Firefox. And then in this instance, since I have my SQL running, I can also do PHP my admin so that we see our database running. So this simply gives us an idea of what our PHP and MySQL should be doing. So if you remember, in one of our lessons, we created our school database, which was this one, which then means we can be able to create tables and values within our uh, MySQL and also our website. So in as a revision or as revision, we then need to know some of the following. We can create a folder and we can call it diploma. And then with our folder diploma, we can then be able to open it and then view the contents of our diploma. But if it is not within our web server, we can't save this information as PHP. But we can save the information as HTML for us to view whatever the contents of this particular folder is. So we said we create a notes text file, and then in our notes, we then want to put the contents of each element that we want. So we want an HTML, we want a CSS, we want a JavaScript, we want login, we want a register. So from there, for us to be able to view our files outside of PHP, we need to create a new file. We go File, Save As. We need to locate the folder, which is diploma. We need to save it as index.html. We go to the type, which is all files, click on save, and then now our page can be viewed online. Okay, so as it stands, we can actually be able to open this file and then get to see that our index.html is blank. It has nothing in it. At the same time, we then now need to set a few values on our page. So the first value is the top of the page where it reads index.html. We can actually set that as a title. The body of the page where it is blank, we can put information that we want. However, without any tag, we can actually say welcome. Click on save, we come back, we refresh, and it displays welcome. So basically what it means is it's text that we can be able to use, but with the markup or the tag, they help us to design and work with our page to get the content that is readily available or can be available. Which is why now when we want to design this, we then come back and we can start putting our tag. So the first tag is the HTML tag, whereby we are telling the browser the format we want our information to be placed. So this becomes the start and the end of our page. From there, we have a head tag, which gives us the heading, and it also contains the information we want to view at the top of our page, which is this part. Let me make this larger so that it's visible. We also want to put a title, which is also another tag to give us the values that we can work with in our page. So our title can then be example website. Okay. And then at the same time, we also want a body, which is another tag that we will use for our page, like that. So I'm trying to catch up with you guys. So I'm sure now it's pretty much revision for what you did yesterday. At the same time now, we now need to put our content. So as we described yesterday, we want to put links. And our links start this way, whereby we have an anchor, where we have an opening and closing tag, we have an href, and then we have the title of the link, like that. So like we described, our anchor tag, which is this one, simply gives us a link. And our link goes to an h reference or an href, which simply means at this particular instance, we are saying this is a hyperlink reference. So with our hyperlink reference, it will then need to reference a particular instance. So for example, if I first use a hashtag, if I click on file and then I save this, I come back to my page, I'll then get to see that I've got HTML, and if I click on it, it will then give me the same page. But what it's actually doing is it's actually not giving me the same page that I'm working with. It's actually giving me a reference. And the reference that I'm getting is the hashtag that is within my page. So in other words, we are then saying wherever we see a hash, we are referencing somewhere within the page. So I can actually create a place where I would want to have a hash and then be able to access that particular point within my page. But in this instance, we don't want to use a hash. We want to use index.html. At the same time, we would want to create more links, which is our next value, which will be CSS. We create another set of links. And then this will be our JavaScript. This will be our login. This will be our register, like that. So we also need references for each of these elements. So the next part that we did was to create pages for each of these elements. So we would need to have a css.html, we need to have a js.html, a login.html, a register.html, like that. And this then means our page is done in terms of links. We also need to have a heading for each of the pages, H1 and H1, whereby we say HTML tutorial. This is for this particular page. If we save and we go to our page, we then get to see the following. However, we have seen how this looks in our Opera. Let's also open it with our Firefox. So our Firefox, it also looks exactly the same, but with each browser, they've got different attributes that might limit browser functions among other elements. At the same time, let's then copy and paste this code and create the next page, whereby I'll save again. This is css.html. So we go to File, we go to Save, we then go to css.html for the file name, and the type would be all files. We click on Save. So this then means I now have my CSS page. I can do the same. Let's actually change before we move on. We change this to CSS. Click on Save. We go to File, New. We paste our content. We change this one to JavaScript. Click on Save. We go to all files, and then this becomes js.html. We click on Save. In our folder, we now have 3 elements. At the same time, we are now left with 2 extra pages, which is login and register. So we also do the same concept. Control copy, new, paste. This becomes our login. We save it as well. Becomes login.html. So whilst you're doing this, please make sure all your referencing is exactly the same. If it's index.html, make sure there's a file called index.html. If it's css.html, make sure that file exists. If it's JavaScript, make sure that file exists. Login and register, make sure the files exist. The last page we need now is our register. So we also come to this point and put register. We then go to File, Save As, all files, register.html. Click on Save. So as soon as this is done, we are pretty much done with how our links work. So if we come back to our page, we refresh, Now each link has its content or has some content, right? At the same time, each time that I'm selecting the link, if you notice this section, it would be changing to give the reference to the particular link that we are talking about. So the first type of link that we need to work with is a hyperlink. And a hyperlink simply links us to an existing page that would have been referenced from the calling page. So what that simply means is, with our HTML, we are simply calling the HTML page. So if I click on it, I then view the HTML page. If I click on the CSS page, I've called the CSS page. If I click on the JS page, I've clicked or I've called on the JavaScript page. If I go to the login, I've gone to my login page. If I've gone to the register, I've done exactly the same. I did it. So that's the first element we now need to at least know. So the things that we have looked at is our HTML tag, which we said creates our web page, our header tag, which we said creates the area where most of the components that our page requires are stored, including the title. And then at the same time, we can also say with our title, we then name it an example website. We've got our body, which gives us the full body of the page. And then we've got our links that link us to the various pages that we have. We've got our heading, which is our H1, and it gives us the main content of the page. And so from our links, let's also work with another set of values that we might want to link up. The first element we might want to link is we might need to add a CSS file. So a CSS file is usually a file that is not HTML, but it does certain changes to our page. So to do that, we need to go back to our folder. And our folder does not contain any CSS file. And how we had done it in some of our learning, we created a new folder and we named that folder CSS. So in the folder called CSS is where we want to store our CSS file. So our CSS file simply means it's a file similar to our HTML, but the extension now comes as .css. So what that then means now is it's a link that we want to link, or rather it's a file that we want to add to our existing document. So if you remember, I said our head section contains all the files that we want to work with. So it means any files that we might want to add to this section or to our page, we need to call them in the head section. If we are going back to C, it is similar to us having our header files that we had in C. So the header files would then include information that we want to work with. So to do that, we simply come below title, we press enter, we put a link. So this link becomes something slightly similar, but slightly different to our A, whereby we also have an href. This is where it becomes similar. Our anchor tag, which is our A, gives us a value that has been placed within our page. So our page contains a value, and then we put our A tag so that we know that that's the value we want to work with. However, our link in this particular instance takes a document that exists somewhere, and then it makes it part of the current HTML page by including whatever it contains. So for example, since we want to put a CSS file, we then need to put a reference to what type of file it is that we're working with. So in many instances, I'm sure you've seen when you're working with a web page or when you're working with a website, I hope, no, it's actually not changing what I'm hoping for. But if you go to where it says localhost, if you're doing it on your machine, there's an image that's there. There's an image that is on your local host, and if we inspect the page source, we can actually be able to see that image, or we can actually be able to see where that image is located. So for example, this is what gives us that image, right? Maybe let's actually do it as an example so that we see what we are talking about. In this particular instance, we've got a link, and then the link has its content. Let me just copy the content. We'll modify it to suit what we want. So the link was as follows. We have a link, which is the keyword. We've got a rel, which gives us icon. We've got an href, which gives us the type of icon we want. We've got the type of link, which is an image dash x icon. What this simply means is we want to be able to get an image or an icon, and then that then becomes our reference point for our value. So in this particular instance, maybe let's actually copy this format. Like that. So what this then means now is the first part or the first portion, which is the REL. I'm not really sure what REL stands for, but it pretty much defines the content we want to add to our page. And then the href then links us to the value that we want, and then the type gives us the type of file that we want to be able to work with. And then, so if I save this file as it is, if I go back to my page, I won't see a change. Why? Because I don't have that image. So for me to be able to see a change, I'll need to do the following. I'm just going to, since I don't have my own images, I'm just going to steal one from XAMPP. So I go to XAMPP, we go to htdocs, we go to dashboard, and then there's this favicon.icon. So I can copy that. I come back to my folder. I paste it on my page. After pasting it on my page, I go back to my page, I refresh, and you then notice that the image that I've called upon shows up in the header section next to where it says example website. So what we are saying is this. In this particular instance, we have just looked at my link. I've defined that I want a type, which is an icon. So I'm expecting an image. I've then given the location of this icon, and I've put the name of the icon and its extension. And then I've also specified the type of whatever it is that I'm looking for. And then that then gives me my icon. Okay. So let's redo the same process with something different now. Now we want to put the next link. So in essence, we have created a page. We have said that this page is an HTML page. The HTML page, we have used an external value, which is not a page. We have used an icon. And then that icon, we've used the link reference to be able to get that icon. And then when the icon has been placed, we can view it in our browser, which is our Firefox. And for our Opera as well, we can refresh. Okay, Opera is refusing to refresh. Or it actually depends on the page that I'm on. We are on register, okay? Yes, so it's actually only visible on register. Okay, so that is what I have done. So what this then means is wherever you have the link saved on the page, it will only show on that particular document. Any other document that doesn't have this link within it, it will not show the icon. Okay, from there, let's get into the next element, and then we'll also create the element so that we see how it works. So the next element we want is a style sheet. Right. So what does this mean? If you remember when you guys did your design in Microsoft Word, it will then give you a style. So that style, we can actually create it as a separate file that we want to use. Hence, we called this a cascading style sheet, which is the reference for CSS. So CSS simply means it's a cascading style sheet. So that's what CSS stands for. It's just cascading style. Someone might then ask, why are we then calling them sheets? In a given website, we can have more than one sheet. So hence we then refer to them as cascading style sheets. So what this then means is if we've got our style sheet, what we now need to do is we need to give a reference to where the style sheet is stored. So to do that, we do the following. We come to our href and then we want to put our style sheet in CSS, and then we want to name our style sheet page.css. And then for the type, we also put text slash style. No, I think text will still do. We can leave it like that. So we then give it as a reference whereby we say style sheet href page.css type text. So this then means within our page or with our page, we've created two outside elements. The first element was our icon. The second element is our style sheet. So our style sheet would then give us uh, the page setup or the page design that we want to have on our page. Let's move on. So from this stage now, or from this stage, we now want to create our style sheet, which is page.css. To do that, we also do exactly the same thing. We go to, I just need to copy this, file, and then new. In our file, we then go to file, save as. When we save, we want to go into the folder CSS. We then want to select all files, and then I want to paste the name that I've given it, which is page.css. We click on save. So what this then means now is my style sheet exists. And then the first thing that we had in our style sheet was we had an asterisk, open and close brackets, and we can then start having our information. Right. So before our first set of code, which is an asterisk, opening and closing brackets, we can have what we have learned from the previous programming language, which are comments, and then we then call this tutorial style like that. So what this then means, this will never, or this will work in the same manner as the comments that we had in C. And it simply means we can be able to put comments on whatever content we want to style on our page. So let's get started. Simply put, it's us defining what we want to view on our page. So the first thing that we can do is we can actually put a color. And the color can be something that we want to use. So we can have any color, right? And by default, we are using black. Let's say we don't want to be using black, we want to use blue. That then becomes our color. We click on save. And when we have saved our content, we can come back to our page, we refresh. We have saved it, we refresh. Let's see on the other page. Okay, we've referenced it properly. I don't know if there's anything that we've missed, but as it stands, it's supposed to then give us a different color. Maybe let's add an extra formatting. Let's say we put it at 36px as our code. Let's refresh. Okay, it's still not changing. I'm not sure what I missed in the styling, but as it stands, this is how we start working with our styles. I'll work on that to see what our problem could be. Or rather, let's actually just do as an example. We right click, we go to inspect. Okay, I can't seem to see any problems so far. So we now have our CSS, we now have our pages. We also now need to put some content. Okay, so each page contains or should contain its own content, as we can see here. Let's say we want to put something other than what we've got there. So I go to profiles, I go to index, I come to my HTML. So let's say I want to put some text on my HTML file. We can simply go to create a p tag, and our p tag simply means it's a paragraph tag. We want to be able to put some text on this particular page. So like I did before, I can actually be able to steal from our main page from XAMPP. I'll just copy this information. I copy that information, I come to my notepad, I paste my information, I click on save. If I come back to my page, I'll be having some text, which will be as follows. Okay, so that is our p tag. And we can have as many tags as is possible. So that is our p tag. At the same time, we can also add different tags for different things. So the first tag that we have in our text is our h1, which gives us our heading. The next tag we've got is our p tag, which gives us a paragraph. The next tag that we can work with is our unordered list, right? So our unordered list will contain two sets of tags. The outside tag would be UL, and we have its closing, UL tag. The inside tag will be LI, and the closing, LI tag. So what this then means is we can actually be able to say tag, whereby our tags would then be part of how we would want to format our page, or what we would want to format on our page. So if I save this information and I refresh, I'll then be able to see my unordered list, which is now my tags, right? But I can have as many lists as I want. So my lists would be the LI. I can also give a second example and say with my LI tag, I can also have images like that. So what this then means is if I refresh, I now have a new tag, which is images, and it's under my unordered list. And then my unordered list now has tags and images. The next set of tags that we can work with outside of our unordered list, we can then be able to use our images or to create images based on specific elements we want to have. So let's say for lack of we can say resources, among other things. Let's say I want to create my own image. I can open my Word. I can create a document, and then in my document, I can then create an image that I want to see. So you can also follow along if you got Word or any other option that you can use to create something. So let's say I want to create an image, or I want to create something that I'll then make into an image. So we can say working in style, right? I highlight my text, I make it larger, I maybe play around with font, and pick a font that I might like. Okay, I like that font. And then I want to make this an image. So I go to my insert, I then go to screenshot, and then I take a screenshot, and then I'm done. I've actually created an image that I can be able to work with. So it's now working in style is now my image. And I can actually copy this image and make it into an image that I can work with. So I go to my page, I paste my working with style, I then go to file, save as. So I need to save it in the same folder that I've been working. So I come there and I save it as WS for working in style. I click on save. Now I have an image. So that's how I can create my images. I just went to my Word. I then went to insert. I created an image. And then if I come back to my folder, I'll be able to view that now I have an image which is WS. Yes. Okay. So from there, we now want to see how we can work with images. The next bit is now to insert an image. To insert an image, we now need to just have one tag, which would be img. And img simply means we can put an image. And to put our image or to insert our image, we need to have the following. We need to have src is equal to, and then we can start from there. So here's another similarity that we've got with our image, our link, and our a tag. They all follow the same procedure to get to a specific value. So in our link, which is this one, what we need to do to get to the value is to use href. In our image, to get to our value, we use src is equal to. In our link, in the other one, we actually just put href as well. So in this particular instance, we then now need to put the type of object we want to use, which will be ws.png. ws.png becomes our image, and we've got our image stored there, and ws is the name and the extension is .png. So that is what we want to view within or on our page. So if I click on save, we can be able to refresh, and then we have our image which is working in style. Okay, so let me go over that once more so that we get to see how we can do this. So one option is what I've done, whereby I go to my document, I pick my working in style, I do my screenshot in that manner. Another way you can do it is you can then say when you are here, let's say you are at this particular instance, you are in your Microsoft Word, and like me, you don't have the word that I'm using or the type of word that I'm using. You can simply go to function and then print screen on your keyboard. Function and then print screen. If you're using a laptop, you can just use print screen. If you're using a desktop, you then open your Microsoft Paint like I've done. You then paste whatever it is that you have copied. And then it comes out like this. This is more tedious, but it is also a way you can then get your image. From there, when you have your image there, you then come to select, and then you want to get working with style. You right click, you then cut it, you go to file, you go to new, you don't save the document, you then paste, and then you now have your working in style. It's another way of actually doing it. So let me go through that again. I come back to my document, which is working in style. On your laptop, it's function and then print screen. On your keyboard or on your computer, it's just print screen. So I go to function and then print screen. I come to my word pad or my paint. I paste the content. I then, after pasting my contents, I go to select. I select the part that I want. I right click, I cut whatever I've selected. I go to file, I go to new, don't save, I then paste. I now have my working in style. From there, you are then, like me, go to file, save as, you then save it as ws.png, you click on save, click on yes, now you have your working in style. That's another way of also getting your image in your HTML document. Yes. To do adjustments of your image or to do adjustments of the size of your image, you just simply come to your image, which is your image. After your image, you then go to, you put a space, then put a width. You then also put a height, like that, so that you adjust your image size. So when you're in Paint, at least you can be able to sort of see the size of the image. We are saying this image is 467 pixels by 97. 467, which is that, the width and the height being 96. So for example, let's say I want to make this image bigger. I know it's 467 by something, that's for the new image. I'm not sure about the old image, but let's say I want to make it smaller. I can then simply say 300 px by 45. 45 px. I click on save. I go back to my page. The moment I refresh, I'll then see my image changes in size. So it becomes small. I can also make it bigger by saying, let's say I want it to be 600 by 145. Click on save, come back to my page, I refresh, and then I've made my image large. So yes, we can be able to change the size of our image. Mhm. The yes, WS. Right, WS gives a reference to our image. So that is how we work with our images. Okay? Yes. Yes, we can be able to play around with the positioning. Although the positioning now, we can be able to add either your style sheet or you would be putting a padding. So with our padding and our style sheets, we then need to work with them in our style sheets, not in our HTML. So hence the need for us to actually learn our style sheet. Yes, yes, that's exactly it. Okay, if there are no questions, let us proceed. The next thing we might also need to learn about in our images is we can also, or rather in our HTML, not our images, we can also be able to do another thing that can also show what he was asking. We can be able to create a table, right? And then our table can then give the positioning of the image. Let's say we create a new element, which is a table, which starts as follows, table, and ends as table, right? With our table, we can also be able to manipulate how our table will look, or will have whatever it is that we want the table to have. So a table now becomes something that we can manipulate. So for example, we can have a border, and our border can be 1. So in other words, we're then saying we want to be able to view what this table looks like. So let's actually have a table border. We can also have the contents of the table, which will be our table row and its closing tag. We can also have the contents within the table, which is our table column. Table column. Right. So what this then means now is with our table row and our table column, we now have a column. So TD stands for our column and TR stands for our row. Let's actually have 2 sets of our TD, and then we can view what the previous individual had asked for. Okay, So we can have our image within our table, and we then have the source being equal to our WS, and we'll just copy that and we paste it in our column. So we need to make sure that each of our elements are properly done. So we can then put it this way and say we've got two images in our individual table. So the first part gives us the table with a border. The next part gives us a row. The next part gives us a column. So if we save this and we refresh on our page, we would actually see the following. Let me just reduce the size a bit. So we'd actually see the following, whereby we've got our table and the two images within our table. But the reason why we can't see our images is we missed the extension, which is this one. Because we missed the extension, it will not give us our image. So we need to put the extension for us to be able to see the image. Like that. So what this then means is with the extensions, if we refresh, we'll be able to see our table, right? So the outside aspect of our table is our border, and the contents of our table are the two images, which is working in style and working in style. So it's one way of actually playing with the position of the table or with the position of the image. At the same time, you can also play around with the table to get whatever element you want to have within your page or on your page. So it's partly answering the previous question, and it's also showing how we can also use tables for whatever element we want to have. Okay, let us proceed. The next thing that we want to also get into is some of the elements that we might want to work with on our page. So for example, let's say I want to create yes, you can. You can be able to play around with the size, whereby you can either play around with the table properties themselves, because there's properties for the table, whereby you can also do the following. Let's say I come at that particular instance, I create another row. Let's maybe add more to our table. I create another row, and then I put two columns as well, TD and TD. No, I just put a single column, sorry. I then put maybe example. Control save, and then we refresh our page. We'll actually see the following. Right, I think also because of that wooden part, it's a bit difficult for you guys to see. We'll actually see that that is what our table will look like. We now have our working in style, and then the example is almost not visible. But as you can see at the edge of the table, we've got a blank space. It's not very visible when it's being projected, but there's like a blank space that's there on the table. So in other words, we can actually be able to play around with this space. To play around with that space, we then need to also come to our row and put a call span equals to. We can then make it 2. Click on save, we refresh, and then the cell goes to both columns that we've got. Right, maybe let me take a step back and explain that bit once more. We are saying when we are creating our table, we've got our TR, which stands for our table row. We've got our TD, which stands for our table column. The first row has got 2 columns. The second row has got 1 column. So for us to be able to match the 1 column in the second row to the 2 columns in the first row, we'll simply put 1 column, but we'll put a further specification to say a column span of 2, which then means we want the column to stretch to meet the 2 columns from the previous row. So that then gives us our table shape looking the way it is looking. Okay, tables at this particular stage are outdated, but they can help you at least understand where they have started from and where they are now, and some of the things that we might need to use within our design of a particular page. I don't know if there are any questions or if there's anyone who's left behind somewhere. If not, let us proceed. Yes. Close that. Yes. Maybe let me do it this way. We are saying we are putting a table, right? Our table looks like that, or rather should look like that, whereby we've got 4 spaces. But in our page, we did not have 4 spaces like this. We had this space and this section being part of the table, but not being met. So what we are doing is we are then saying in this particular section, I right click and I've merged the cells. So it's as good as my table now looks like that. I've got an image there, I've got an image there, and I've got my text there. So we want our table to look like this. So what column span just does, it merges the 2 cells. And then your table will now look like that. So that is what our call span. Okay. Are there any questions? Yes. Yes. Like I said, align is now a different type of thing. And align, you then first of all need to understand that align is a different aspect of whatever tags we're working on. Align, like you said, maybe the first thing we need to actually understand before we get confused. Align is a method that we want to work. We can actually use it within any of our tags, but would prefer to have it as our CSS, because our CSS would then handle how each element would be displayed or used. It's very difficult to then explain it without showing you how it works. So if I then show you how it works, maybe it will give a better impact on it. So some of the things that we might be leaving out, we'll then explain them better in CSS. So for example, we've got our image at that particular point. We can then have an align. And our align can then give us a position. Right? So align is what he's actually explaining or what he's talking about. So it's just a matter of you saying where do you want this element to be put. At the same time, if we refresh, you'd actually find that on the image, it does not work as we hope that it should work. Reason being, it would then need to be part of a style for it to work. So align as it stands should be like that. But we then now need to put a style, and it's easier to actually have our style in our style sheet. So if we let's just save this and let's go to our style sheet, right? So we can then come to this particular point and then say align. We can then put center like that. So what this then means is we've aligned whatever it is that we want to align and we've put it at center. And if we want to align a specific element, let's say it's the table now, we can then come in and say table, we open and we close brackets, and then we put align center within our table. So that then at least helps us create whatever it is that we are hoping to create step by step, and also have it as part of our learning. So since we haven't actually gone further into our CSS, align at this particular instance will not make sense because we're not doing it as yet. But I've just made corrections to this so that when we are working with CSS, it becomes easier to know how we can work with our align. Okay, so let's proceed. The next thing that we also want to implement or add to this is some of the concepts or some of the content that we can put within our page, right? We've looked at tags, we've looked at images, we've looked at tables. We would also want to look at an outdated but still functional aspect of our HTML, which would be as follows. By the way, this is outdated, but it still works. So the outdated tag is as follows. I think I spelled it right. It's very difficult to spell, but that is the tag. So what this simply does is it was the first aspect of actually having floating text, whereby if we've got that tag, we can put an example of moving text. Right. So what this simply did is it will give you text that moves on your page. If I refresh, hopefully I typed it right. No, I think I typed the tag wrong. Let's see if we remove one E. It's very outdated. I don't use it anymore. It's moving with the double E. Okay, 1 second, while I just verify. So with our style sheets, here's how they work. They work in us giving a link, and the link should have the style sheet that we're working with, and then that then modifies our page or modifies the content of our page. But however, at this particular instance, we then need to know how to work with our style sheets and to have specific elements about our style sheet. Here,